The early 1950s produced some of Paramount Pictures' most memorable films, including Shane, A Place in the Sun, White Christmas, Sunset Boulevard, and Stalag 17. But it was William Wyler's Roman Holiday which captured the innocence and magic of that era.
I'd like to do just whatever I like, the whole day long.
Things like having your hair cut, eating gelato?
Yes, and I'd like to sit at a sidewalk cafe and look in shop windows, walk in the rain, have fun and maybe some excitement.
Tell you what, why don't we do all those things together?
But don't you have to work?
Work? Now, today is going to be a holiday.
Audiences love the fairy tale of a young princess who runs away from her official duties and spends a glorious and unforgettable day with a handsome newspaperman. By 1953, William Wyler had long established himself as one of Hollywood's most successful and brilliant dramatic directors, having won the Best Director Academy Award for Mrs. Miniver and The Best Years of Our Lives. But Roman Holiday would be his first comedy in almost 20 years.
I'm constantly amazed by the quality of my father's work and how many of the films, so many decades later, still resonate so well.
You know, he started out at Universal making six-day westerns and became one of the biggest directors in town.
The thing about William Wyler that struck me, even as a kid, was he was absolutely unique unto himself. And I mean, the respect that Wyler has as a filmmaker, I give him as a human being.
He was an artist, and he knew that, and he behaved that way, and he turned out marvelous, marvelous pictures.
My father had a terrible time deciding on what film to make next. Usually it was a struggle that took months.
Wyler wouldn't do a script that wasn't mechanically properly structured.
The story for Roman Holiday was written by Dalton Trumbo. Trumbo was a highly regarded screenwriter in Hollywood, but in the early 1950s he was considered a communist sympathizer by the House Subcommittee on Un-American Activities and was blacklisted by the film community.
I never knew until much later that Dalton Trumbo had written that screenplay because everyone kept it a deep secret.
Hollywood's had a lot of dark moments in our business, mostly bright, none in dark moments. We had a period of the blacklist, for instance. Dalton Trumbo contributed greatly to Roman Holiday. His name was not on the screen.
Are you or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
I believe I have the right to be confronted with any evidence which supports this question. I should like to see what you have.
Dalton Trumbo had just been investigated by HUAC, and he wouldn't talk, and he was going to be imprisoned for, he had a year's prison sentence for communist sympathies and for not talking.
I think it's a wonderful story that the writer Ian Hunter fronted for Trumbo.
So he realized he was going to have to get some money for his wife and children while he was in jail, so he quickly wrote this screenplay under a pseudonym.
He got $50,000, which he gave to Trumbo.
And Frank Capra was originally going to direct it, and then he found out it was Dalton Trumbo, and he got nervous. William Wyler stepped in.
My father was not afraid to hire people who were blacklisted.
Trumbo still managed to write 18 screenplays under pseudonyms during the dark years he was considered an outcast by Hollywood. And it would be 4 more decades before he would officially be recognized for his work.
I think later the Writers Guild saw that it was put back on the screen, probably credits like that. It was a tragic period for our industry. But I think our industry is trying to reconcile those days and try to come back.
Wyler was keenly aware that the casting of Roman Holiday would be critical to the picture's success. Initially, he had considered Elizabeth Taylor and Gene Simmons for the role of the princess, but since neither was available, he chose a young, unknown actress, and by doing so, launched the film career of one of Hollywood's brightest stars. While working in a small film in Monte Carlo, Audrey Hepburn was spotted by the noted French writer Colette. Colette, intrigued by the young actress's beauty and demeanor, insisted that she be considered for the title role for the upcoming Broadway production of her play, Gigi, a part that Hepburn easily won. Coincidentally, at the same time, Paramount had also heard about this young actress.
The first big picture that Audrey Hepburn did for us, of course, was Roman Holiday, which was shot in Rome. And it was the first picture she'd done in America.
I mean, she had had roles before, but not in major films. She'd done Broadway, she'd done Gigi on Broadway, so she wasn't just the ugly duckling who suddenly sprouted, but there was a little of that. There was a little bit of a fairy tale story in her own leap to stardom.
Well, I think my father was very excited to find Audrey Hepburn. It was something of a fluke because she was completely unknown. He decided to do a test of her, and although he wasn't able to stay and film it himself, he told the director to ask the cameraman and the sound man to keep them both rolling after the director said cut, so that she would relax and they would be able to see her in a relaxed state.
You spent the whole war in Arnhem?
Yes.
Wasn't it pretty awful?
Yes, it was very bad.
But did you entertain the people there yourself? Is that how you began?
No, not quite how I began. I went to ballet school once I knew I was settled there for quite a while. Didn't know how long the war was going to last, so I went to ballet school and learned to dance. And in about 1944, about a year before the end of the war, I was quite capable of performing. And it was a sort of some way in which I could make some contribution, and I did give performances to collect money for the underground, which always needed money.
And what about the Germans? What did they do about it?
I didn't know about it.
Just as Audrey Hepburn is in a class by herself, it seems more so now even than she did at the time, I think. She stood up in a way that maybe other stars of the 50s haven't.
She was way above us. She was so darling, she was so wonderful, so helpful. She was not Hollywoodish at all, but she could act.
She is her own romantic mystique. She's not really plugged into some kind of general 50s dynamic. I think she carries her own romantic system with her. She's just one of a kind.
Can I sleep here?
Well, that's the general idea.
Can I have a silk nightgown with rosebuds on it?
I'm afraid you'll have to rough it tonight. In these.
But John!
Sorry, honey, but I haven't worn a nightgown in years.
For the role of Joe Bradley, the male lead, Wyler first offered the part to Hollywood favorite Cary Grant. But after reading the script, Grant declined, knowing that all of the attention in this picture would be centered around the princess. Wyler, knowing he would still need a prominent actor to counter newcomer Hepburn, offered the role to Gregory Peck.
I always felt every time someone sent me a comedy script that Cary Grant had seen it first and had turned it down.
If I were you, I would try some other line of business, like mattress testing.
Is this the princess?
Yes, Mr. Bradley, that is the princess. It isn't Annie Oakley, Dorothy L'Amour, or Madame Chiang Kai-shek. Take a good look at her. You might be interviewing her again someday.
Am I fired?
No, you're not fired. When I want to fire you, you won't have to ask. You know you're fired. The man's mad.
I had done a good deal of comedy in the theater, even some farce. So I jumped at the opportunity to play Roman Holiday.
If you can possibly imagine what it was like for me many years ago, a totally unknown Hofer, to be cast in a Hollywood movie opposite Gregory Peck, the beautiful, quiet, gentle hero of countless marvelous movies. In my innocence, I thought he'd be just like that. He was.